to what he had in mind for stopping health reform. I understand their desperation to stop it. Do you know what they're going to pull out of their hat to try to kill it?
I think they're going to, with reconciliation, they're going to try to do amendments, as many as they can get away with. And I think we keep them here all night. Tonight, the next night, the night after, the night after. If they're going to try to filibuster in the traditional sense or in the more modern obstructionist sense that they do, they're going to have pain too. They're going to have to stay all night, and we're going to have quorum calls, and we're going to do whatever we need to do to get this passed within the Senate rules and within fair play. But that's the way we've done it all along. And I just, you know, this whole thing when they say we're going to reconciliation, we're going to turn over 1/7 of the American economy. No, reconciliation, for one thing, it's a majority vote, as you point out, which every country in the world runs their parliament or their Congress by. But more than that, the reconciliation part of the bill is small at the edges, making positive changes in the big bill that both houses have already passed, in the Senate with a supermajority of 60, and in the House. So this whole thing that we're turning over reconciliation. One more point. When I hear them say they only did little things with reconciliation, when I was in the House, the Senate did reconciliation. When they did reconciliation on tax bills, they took a surplus that was going to be trillions of dollars and turned it into a deficit, a debt, which was going to be trillions of dollars. And they say that was a minor thing they did with reconciliation. Nice try on that one, my friends.
Senator Brown, briefly, one last thing on health reform. The current bill before the Senate does not include a public option. You said today that you might offer a separate bill that would include the public option. How would that work exactly, and what sort of support do you think you'd get?
Well, my comments that way just meant I don't give up on this. When Senator Kennedy and Senator Dodd, the acting chair of the Health Committee, asked Senator Sheldon Whitehouse from Rhode Island, and me to write the public option bill, we've been working on it ever since for 7 or 8 months. We're going to try to get it in reconciliation. If we fail, we're going to keep trying and keep trying. If it's a free standalone bill later, I'm not giving up on this. And by the time this bill takes effect, this law fully takes effect, I hope to have the public option included, because it will save money. It will keep the insurance companies honest. The insurance companies always play this game a step ahead of the sheriff, and we need the discipline on the market, the discipline on the insurance companies, and the choice that so many Americans that are being told you got to buy insurance. We want you to have the option of buying a public insurance plan that's freestanding and can compete toe-to-toe with Aetna and Blue Cross and all these other insurance companies.
Democratic Senator Sherrod Brown of Ohio, thank you for your time tonight, sir. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Rachel.
There's big news out of the Texas primary results. The Tea Party and Ron Paul-supported candidate for governor, a woman named Deborah Medina, had a very respectable showing for someone whose platform was that the governor, who maybe wants to secede from the union, isn't right-wing enough. Ms. Medina got more than 18% of the vote. In other words, nearly 1 in every 5 voters in the Republican primary in Texas voted for her. Compare that to the 31% won by Kay Bailey Hutchison, a recognized sitting U.S. senator. Also, a pair of Tea Party candidates in down-ballot races actually defeated or forced runoffs with Republican incumbents. But as America continues to try to figure out in what direction the Republican Party is going, what the GOP's path out of the political wilderness is going to be, we're left with electoral results like that on the one hand, but also something that the great Chris Hayes mentioned on this show yesterday. Chris, in our interview last night, pointed out that before Senator Jim Bunning's one-man stand against unemployment benefits came crashing down last night, Kentucky Senate candidate Rand Paul, the son of Congressman Ron Paul, attended a rally celebrating Senator Bunning and his brave obstructionist stand yesterday afternoon outside Senator Bunning's Lexington, Kentucky offices. And it's not just Rand Paul. All 3 of the Republicans who are looking to replace Senator Bunning endorsed what Senator Bunning did in the Senate this week. The folks celebrating Jim Bunning are seeing him as an anti-government, anti-spending activist. But to embrace Jim Bunning is to embrace a strange record if you really are a libertarian, if you really are a deficit hawk, if you really care about spending and responsibility. I mean, sure, Jim Bunning quixotically blocked this one bill that involved spending money, but look at Jim Bunning's record. As we pointed out on the show last night, Senator Bunning's been voting to add billions to the deficit for years, including many votes for bills that, like the one he was roadblocking this week, weren't paid for. Votes like the 2001 Bush tax cuts, the 2003 Bush tax cuts, the Medicare prescription drug benefit, the 2003 extension of unemployment benefits, the 2008 war supplemental bill, just to cherry pick a few. Here's something to keep in mind as Republican senators continue to argue against using reconciliation to pass health reform, as the Republican Party as a whole continues to try to capitalize on the conservative uprising in the streets and in the conservative movement, as the Tea Partiers themselves continue to shout about how much they care about the deficit, how anti-spending they are. These are the facts. This is something I want you to look at here. This is the historical truth from the Congressional Budget Office. This is their numbers. This is a graph that in constant dollars shows 3 different measures and their effect on the budget. That first one, the one that goes way, way, way down there, that represents the 2001 Bush tax cuts. Passed, of course, using budget reconciliation. That was the effect on the budget and the deficit. The second bar, the one that also goes way, way, way down, represents the second Bush tax cuts, also passed using budget reconciliation. And that last bar, the one that actually has a positive net effect on the budget and the deficit, that's the health reform bill that was passed by the Senate. That's what it is projected to do. So which one of those are the so-called deficit hawks railing against now? Does any of this make sense? Joining us now is New York Times columnist Frank Rich. Mr. Rich, thank you so much for being here.
Great to see you, Rachel.
I'm so excited about that graph, I can hardly stand it. I just feel sometimes...
It's a great graph.
Well,
yes.
Sometimes you spend weeks and months talking about something, and then you look at one picture, and it's like, right, that makes it clear. Where is the dividing line between the Republican Party and the sort of the conservative uprising that you wrote about in your column this week, the Tea Party movement?
I think there's a huge dividing line. I think it's to the peril of the establishment Republican Party. I think the Tea Party people, a lot of them, it's hard to generalize about them, realize exactly what's in that graph. They associate the George Bush, John McCain, Mitch McConnell, John Boehner Republican Party with deficits. They may have been tax cuts that they like. They may not know the fine points, but they're not inviting those people to those rallies. They rallied around Bunning for 10 minutes because he's a lame duck who suddenly became a deficit hawk for 10 minutes.
And
at the end
you
of
think they rally around him out of ignorance of his record?
Yeah, I think they just rallied around what he did this past week.
Okay.
That's it. And they don't. And he's a symbol. I mean, he's going to be gone anyway. He's out of office. But the fact is that the Rand Paul, for instance, doesn't have the blessing of Mitch McConnell in his own state. And I think they hate the Republicans. They hate all of Washington. They may hate Obama more, but they hate that establishment party.
When you described that movement as counter-conservative in your column this week, that sort of jumped out at me because I feel like in some small c way it is a conservative movement, but you think that it's, well, what did you mean by counter-conservative?
Well, I think in some ways it's almost like in the 60s on the left. It's sort of countercultural to official establishment conservatism, which they feel has sold them out. If you're a true libertarian and you're really anti-government and you don't even want a Medicare, you don't want government to spend money on Medicare, then you don't like a Republican Party in Washington that's now, positioning himself as a champion of Medicare, and you don't like Bush giving a huge entitlement program on prescription drugs and all the rest of it. So I think they're counter to the official conservatism of the GOP.
I wonder what happens to there is a Libertarian Party in this country, and I wonder what happens to them and the people who have actually been the very small sort of rump of the conservative movement that really have been libertarians all this time, if they're able to capitalize on this. At this point, it seems like there's so much friction between the Republican Party trying to call these folks their own, but then the Republican Party's own record leaving such a bad taste in the mouth of the Tea Party folks that it's not gelling, it's not working.
I agree, and I think you saw the split in the CPAC convention in Washington where, first of all, Ron Paul won the straw poll.
Yeah.
Second, if you look down deeply in that poll, you find that the issues that sort of were the old right, like same-sex marriage, don't even register as important. There's a huge libertarian and youthful libertarian component, and they want nothing to do with this Republican establishment. Will they gain as a party from it? Probably not. There's a lot of chaos in this whole sort of Tea Party conservatism.
The one thing that seems useful about it to me for Democratic prospects is that it does, if Tea Partiers start really making an impact in the Republican Party, and if there is an electoral effect running against the record of George Bush, as you described it, John McCain and others, that unifies Democrats, because it gets Democrats are just as comfortable running against George Bush as they are running against a abolish Medicare, abolish Social Security, true libertarian agenda. I actually think in the long run this probably splits conservatives and puts Democrats in a very good position.
I think it does. In a typical state, Texas may not be a typical state in many ways, but in a typical state, if the far right candidate wins, the Tea Party candidate wins, that only helps the Democrats in terms of independence. At the same time, if the Tea Party candidate loses, that energized base may not turn out for John McCain,
right,
or Charlie Crist if should they triumph in their primaries. So it's kind of a win-win situation for Democrats, which isn't to underestimate the Democrats' ability to screw it all up.
It's a win-win situation for Democrats, I think, strategically, provided that Democrats have some enthusiasm on their side.
Right, and they have to get it, because right now it's not clear what their program is, and as we've seen in the health care debate, you've been talking about